Previously on the Superchunk Super Audio Show, a few months back we did talk about the EPZ Q5, which was really quite good for its asking price. Today we take a look at another brethren from EPZ, the G10 or Symphonic Dragon. So if you are new to the channel and like the latest reviews on all things portable audio, do consider subscribing. You will be a lovely person. For those of you who already subscribed, you are fantastic. So the thing is, EPZ is quite an interesting brand, as I first met the folks back in September, and they have been quietly producing some rather cool IEMs. The Q5 caught the eyes of many as it kinda looks very similar to another IEM. Anyways, today we will be talking about the G10, which looks like the common custom universal shape. They also call this the Symphonic Dragon. So starting off with an unboxing, I must add that although the unboxing isn't all that special with the G10, it is way ahead of some other chifi brands where basically the IEM comes in a box. On the G10 you get a magnetic box. Opening it, you see a very nicely printed paper covering the earphones that is encased in its foam supports. And below that you get a box that says storage box in a strange font, and when you actually open it you realize that they do not actually contain a box but rather a pouch. Inside it is a mic splitter thingy. Also with it are two sets of ear tips that are pretty much better than e-waste. Next, jumping into build quality. I'm sure everybody is really well acquainted in 2024 with resin custom universal shape IEMs. It's really common these days. The G10 is in the same ballpark, but what sets itself apart is the carbon faceplate that has specks of fluorescent paint on it. Sorry, I don't really have a black light to show it to you, but if you just Google, you'll see many images of them from other reviewers. It is pretty interesting, but personally, in my month of owning these, I haven't seen them before, and don't think you actually see them unless you're wearing them to some club that uses black light on the dance floor. But really, when you are at a club, I don't see why you want to wear IEMs, so this is one of those things. But in all seriousness, the faceplate does show the multi-dimensional carbon shards, which is very pretty. Oh yes, it also does have a huge G-spot if it wasn't obvious enough. The chassis is in the dark see-through color, and you can just see bits of the driver through it while the other parts are not so visible. It features a 2-pin termination. Cable on the G10 has an inline microphone which can be used for gaming, great for you to curse at your friends on various games. Inside the G10 is a 10mm single dynamic driver with a diaphragm made from PU plus liquid crystal polymer. Now sound, I have included a graph again for you guys to visualize the sound of the G10. So the G10 is a natural warm IEM that is really all the rage these days, and you can say that they graph pretty similar to another IEM called the Simgot EW200. I will be discussing this in greater detail during the comparison segment below. The G10 is a V-shaped IEM with a slight emphasis on the upper mids, allowing for vocals to feel focused yet delicate. I really enjoyed this sort of signature and can see why it would be popular. Its signature will suit numerous genres really well. Also to add, the G10 is incredibly coherent due to the choice of a single driver, ensuring all the frequency bands are time aligned. Starting off with bass on the G10 is polite and not intrusive. They offer a reasonable quantity but are not bass machines. I found that the dynamics on the bass section to be good but not reaching great, but this is kinda in line with the type of DNA that it has. Sub-bass extension is good as the rumbles are pretty adequate to me. There is a very nice natural bounce to the tone. Micro details are also pretty obvious as you can hear quite clearly how the low frequency rumbles. Mid-bass likewise is very pleasant but not massive in terms of quantity. Because of this, there is an emphasis on the vocal section a bit more. I found that bass is pretty adequate for me, but must reiterate again that these IEMs isn't something that I would recommend if you are looking for a tremendous amount of bass. So next, moving on to mid-range. When you first listen to the G10, what you'll notice is the mid-range as it really demands for your attention. The G10 renders the mid-range band quite vividly. Vocals are clear with above average levels of micro details. Tonal weight here is also slightly thicker than natural, which gives body and meat to male vocals especially. Female vocals here have a very good level of finesse. There is a hint of warmth that accentuate the vocals quite a bit. I would say that the G10 does a good job rendering vocals. For instruments, there is a very lovely level of separation. Separation is good and really fitting in its price class. you can still hear the guitar riffing behind the vocals with good levels of details as well. Treble extension. Treble extension is good on the G10. It isn't the airiest earphone that I've heard, but it renders it in a way that is very natural sounding, not one bit forced. Agents of sibilance such as cymbals and hi-hats are very well controlled as the sizzle fades quite fast and naturally. I like how the treble gives this halation of naturalness to the other frequency bands, making them sound quite lifelike. Next, moving on to Soundstage, when it comes to width and height, for the price, the G10 is good on both width and height. It is expensive and tall, which allows you to have quite a good soundstage experience. Next, talking about depth and positioning, also really good when it comes to depth. Instruments are adequately clear with a very clean sounding bass that ensures a very clear staging experience. Positioning is also quite pinpoint as the whole soundstage is quite a clear affair. Comparisons. This is where things get rather interesting because the G10 does graph very similarly to the Simgot EW200. Not to mention they are also priced quite similarly. This is actually a very good case to show you that graphs are not the be-all and end-all of audio, as really what you're trying to deduce with a graph is trying to look at a 3D object using a 2D screen. So versus the Simgot EW200, you guys already know that these measure very similarly, but what the graph does not tell you is the quality of tone. Comparing both of them side by side, I prefer the EW200 mid-range as it is just smoother and silkier than the G10. The EW200 is more lush sounding in terms of tone, where the G10 does come across as slightly grainier and not as smooth as the EW200 with similar level of details. The G10, however, does have a rather dynamic bass response, and you can hear more out of the sub-bass resonance compared to the EW200, where bass tones tend to feature more mid-bass harmonics. Between the two, the EW200 is a little bit more refined sounding, but the G10 is not really that far back. Next, versus the Kiwi Ears Forteza. So comparing the G10 with the more recent Kiwi Ears Forteza, the Forteza is a more dynamic sounding earphone, ensuring that you get more contrast between the softer and louder passages of music. This in turn makes music more exciting to listen to than the G10. However, the Forteza is quite a bit brighter than the G10 as well. Although bright, I still feel that the treble on the Forteza is smooth. The G10 on the other hand isn't as dynamic, but it is more safe sounding by comparison, as it just sounds sweeter and less offensive. If you're looking for an all-rounder, the G10 would be my preferred choice between the two, but if you have already a similar sounding EM that is kinda natural warm, I would consider the Forteza as it is certainly more unique. And finally, in conclusion, I would say that the G10 is a safe buy if you're looking for an IM that can do almost anything. Just bear in mind, at a similar price, you have the Simgot EW200, which is a bit more refined by comparison. And with that said, I hope you guys liked this week's episode of the Superchunk Super Audio Show. It's finally January 2024 and we are gonna have more interesting and exciting things for you guys ahead. If you guys like the content so far, please kindly press the like and subscribe button as it will help me out a bunch. With that said, I hope to see you guys soon.